What is up, sussies? I'm Duvnan. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're not familiar with me, I also go by Duvnan on TikTok, and I do be out here dropping the sussiest anime theories. Now, speaking of sussy theories, I have already dropped a few on Fire Force on TikTok, but today I have a Fire Force and Soul Eater connecting theory that I want to bring to you guys on YouTube, because it's pretty in-depth, and there's a lot of connection. With that being said, there will be lots of spoilers, probably all the spoilers, so if you don't want Goat Force or Goat Eater spoiled for you, definitely switch off now and go read them, and then come back in like 30 minutes when your Chad brain is done reading the entirety of both series. Thank you. Okay, so now that I put out the spoiler warning, I can say that Fire Force and Soul Eater are confirmed to be in the same verse. Obviously, everybody knows that now. Chapter 304 has been out. So right off the bat, let's start with the main characters, Shinra and Sho, and I'm specifically talking about in their fusion form, Shinra BanGOATman. Now, the obvious connection here is the one that was established by the end of the series. So, Shinra BanGOATman, which is Shinra, Sho, and their mother fused together, are the source of death from Soul Eater. Now, essentially, this should mean that both Ashura the Kishin and Death the Kid also both descend from BanGOATman, but I actually think that when Death took in all of the Fire Force powers, he may have utilized the old Evangelist, or the Despair that Shinra put to sleep, to create Ashura. Kind of a bozo move if you think about it, but also you can't really kill that Despair, so it maybe would make sense to create something that you could talk to and be like, hey dude, chill out. And finally, the last connection in this particular connection is the Lines of Sanzu. So I believe the Lines of Sanzu, since there's 3 of them, signify the full transfer of BanGOATman's essence from the first Shinigami all the way down to Death the Kid. What evidence do I have? Well, there's 3 lines. Oh. So now moving on, I do believe these characters also had individual descendants after they were unfused from BanGOATman, and I'm gonna start with the one I most likely used to clickbait this video. So, did Shinra start a family with a harem? The answer is yes, and let me explain my reasoning. Keep in mind, I came up with this before Inca was confirmed to be a witch, but basically my theory is Iris, Inca, and Shinra, together as a family unit, are the ancestors of the Gorgon family line. Now, at the time, my reasoning was pretty simple. It didn't really make sense to me that the Gorgon family line had black hair, blonde hair, and pink hair in their genealogy until I made the connection of Shinra having black hair, Iris having blonde hair, and Inca having pink hair, and then a chapter later it was confirmed that she was the first witch. So I feel like this theory is almost foolproof. That being said, I have come up with one particular alternative since then about who could be the ancestor of the Gorgon family line. Throughout the series, it's made clear that Arrow, the White-Clad, has a specific admiration for Sho, which is kind of sus because he's like super young and she's not as young. But regardless, it would still make sense because they would have a similar gene pool because Sho is Shinra's brother, as well as the bigger piece of evidence that the Gorgon family's insignia is the Vector Arrow. And Arrow is the only character in Fire Force that represents the Vector Arrow. And a side note, for obvious reasons, just based on appearances, Sho is obviously the ancestor of Soul. For this next one, I haven't seen many good theories connecting Haumea to anybody yet in Soul Eater, so I'm gonna reach a little bit here. I believe that Haumea is actually the ancestor of Maka, and I'll explain why. First off, the idea that seems to be going around that Haumea and Charon were getting married in the last scene of the last chapter is kind of ludicrous to me. Charon is basically Haumea's dad, and it's a huge leap to see a girl in a sundress and a dude in a toga chilling, like, on the beach in the breeze and say, oh yeah, that's a wedding for sure. That being said, the thing I think connects Haumea and Maka is Haumea being described as a saint and her relation to the evangelist, and Maka's anti-demon wavelength. Maka's anti-demon wavelength is essentially the ability to purify evil, madness, and fear, and to me it would be perfect to originate with Haumea, someone who was completely powerless to all 3 of those things before Shinra and Charon intervened and separated her from the evangelist. Now, I should mention my original theory for Maka was that she descended from Juggernaut and Tamaki, but I actually don't really know where they fit in. Maybe with Blair because of her cat theme? And honestly, they could even be the ancestors for a lot of the witches, like Iruka, who uses frog bombs, that's kind of Juggernauty. Mizune is basically like 5 little missiles combined into one to become a witch. And honestly, when it comes to the witches, I feel like they could have descended from any of the female leads. Like, Maki has a lot of witch themes, Tamaki, Iris, Inca is the first witch, maybe Arrow, she's got the arrows. Maba, who may even have been in Fire Force, pointed out by my mutual on TikTok, Kai Soze, because there's a character in the Butcher Cataclysm squad that looks exactly like Maba. So yeah, realistically, all the females are strong in Fire Force, and therefore, it could have been any of them, to be honest. Okay, with all that being said, let's move on to Arthur, because I've got some pretty sussy theories for Arthur as well. So when I was thinking about Arthur, I was like, would Arthur even want to have kids? Like, he really doesn't seem that interested in that at all. But then I thought about how interested he is in being the Night King, and what kind of Night King doesn't have kids? Like, the one thing with kings is having kids. Like, it's literally every king theme. So obviously, first off, I think Hero could be, he's basically Arthur in the Soul Eater verse. He can wield Excalibur, and he's kind of a joke. Realistically, though, the characters I personally think descended from Arthur are Liz and Patty, kids' weapons. They're both fairly dumb, and Patty is super obnoxious. They're almost like if Arthur was split into two people. Basically, Patty is like the annoying, funny part, and Liz is like the gets serious but is also kind of dumb part. And while we're on Arthur, I had one more connection, and I believe that one of Arthur's siblings that his family had in the Netherworld might have actually been the ancestor of Mifune. Now, a lot of people have been saying, oh, Benimaru is actually the ancestor of Mifune because of his sword and his, like, the stick that's sticking out of his mouth. However, the problem I have with that theory is that Benimaru is undeniably Japanese, and Mifune is canonically not Japanese. So to me, Mifune actually fits Arthur's descendant better because he's sort of like a samurai weeb in the similar way that Arthur was a knight weeb. Like, they both love the culture so much that they just became the thing that they love. I mean, Mifune is described as a sword god. Now, I mentioned Benimaru a second ago, and I already ruled out Mifune as a potential descendant, so I'm sure you're wondering who I think Benimaru is an ancestor of. I actually have two theories, and the first is that he is somehow related to the Black Blood and the demon sword Ragnarok. Ragnarok has the instinctive X that we see in Benimaru's eye, and the, like, actual idea of Ragnarok and the demon sword would be up to Benimaru's level in terms of strength in the Soul Eater verse. I don't think anybody beat Benimaru. I feel like, if anything, it was a descendant of his who lost, or maybe even his soul remained in the world and somebody, like, found it and used it to create the demon sword Ragnarok. And my second theory, I'm going to lump Konro in, and it also has to do with more demon weapons, so this could potentially just be their souls as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be them having kids. It could be, like, their souls being used in the creation of a demon weapon line. And that demon weapon line is Tsubaki's demon weapon line, the Nakatsukasa clan. The Nakatsukasa are a special weapon clan that passes down their weapon traits, and they were made by Arachne herself, who created essentially the first real demon weapon. So given the time, Benimaru and Konro could have just died of old age, and then Arachne could have just copped their souls and created the Nakatsukasa clan. Now, on to Charon. My mutual on TikTok, Kai Soze, believes that Charon is actually the ancestor of Fire and Thunder, Keelik's weapon partners, but I have a different theory for both Charon and those weapon twins. So my personal theory for Charon is that he actually is the ancestor of the Death Scythe Dengu Dinga. The reason I believe Dengu is Charon's descendant is because A, he is stated to be one of the more powerful demon weapons, only under Spirit, which is Maka's father, and B, Dengu has very prominent and unique eyes, and Charon's eyes are the one thing that are, like, still a mystery to us, as far as I remember. As for my theory on Fire and Thunder, I feel like they potentially descend from Assault. They have the same energy, and by the end of the series, Assault actually is kind of busted, so I feel like he could definitely be an ancestor of somebody important. Moving on to Vulcan and or Yu. I feel as though Vulcan or Yu or one of their apprentices may have been the Sorcerer Abon. My reasoning for this is the original Abon that we're introduced to in Soul Eater is actually a manifestation by the book itself. It's called Noah, or Greed. And the entity of the book that manifests it is called the Table of Contents, and it looks strikingly mechanical, and very much like an invention that somebody inspired by Vulcan, at least, or Vulcan himself, would make. Next up is Giovanni, and now my personal theory for Giovanni is that he actually continued to live all the way up until the Soul Eater storyline. In the Fire Force storyline, Giovanni was already like 250 years old, and he had switched bodies multiple times. Arthur took him out, and then Shinra revived him because he's big brain. Giovanni and Mosquito have very, very similar themes and share a lot of physical attributes, but I think it goes beyond that, because in his 400-year form, Mosquito states that he was Legion. He says, I was Legion. Now, this could be metaphorical, like, I am many things as one, like he's trying to be a badass, but it could also be like he's gone by many different names, which could point towards him being named Giovanni at one point. Now we got Ogun, and it should be obvious who I think is his descendant. It's definitely Keelik. They have almost the exact same fighting style. The only difference is Keelik uses weapons, and Ogun uses Fire Force powers. That being said, as far as Ogun himself, I think Ogun actually could have been the legendary hero from Soul Eater named Poseidon, because all of his Fire Force attacks were like ocean themed, which is very weird for a fire verse now that I think about it. Also, his ancestor was a ship's captain, and he's really the only, like, mariner-themed character in the verse. The only other potential person I thought could be Poseidon was maybe Obi because of his strength, but I think Ogun makes a lot more sense. So now we're moving into some connections that I have a little bit less evidence for, but just sort of make sense to me. I think Obi might be the ancestor of the Immortal clan from Soul Eater that Free the werewolf was a part of. Now this one's a super quickie. Rekka is definitely the ancestor of the Star Clan because of his eyes. He has star eyes. Very obvious. Next, I think Hinawa might be the ancestor of Giriko because they both have, like, murderous tendencies in their own way. And they look very similar in terms of physical characteristics. Then we got Joker. For Joker, the only justification is this character has the same energy, and that's Stein. Joker and Stein are 100% related. You cannot debunk me. Now, in terms of leaked, his descendant is definitely Ox, because they both have, like, an uncanny talent for making faces. Now, this theory is a little sussy, but you gotta bear with me here. I think Amaterasu, the first pillar, may have actually not died at the end of Fire Force when Shinra recreated the verse. She may have moved on into, like, her own little separate pocket space and became the Great Old One of Power. The Great Old One of Power has a madness wavelength of power that drives people towards what they truly desire, and Amaterasu did that, like, twice in Fire Force, just by being, like, toxic. Alright, last two. So, Justin Law from Soul Eater, I feel like could descend from either Karim Flam or Leonard Burns, because they're both, like, super religious zealots, and Karim has the whole headphone theme, but Leonard has the, like, crazy religious zealot theme. And bonus connection, I feel like Hajiki, the guy who got his head, like, blown clean off by the snake lady, definitely is the ancestor of Azusa, because she is, like, the only character in Soul Eater known for her crazy eyesight, and that's what Hajiki had as well. So I'm sure you guys have your own unique theories. Please throw them up in the comments. That would be sick. Give me a like, throw me a subscribe, hit the bell like you're a Chad with a club or something. I'm trying to stay steady weekly videos, so you can stay tuned for some sick-ass theories and potentially anime recommendations. So, peace.